So this is actually the compare and contrast between our uh, Durvas Muni and Maharaj Ambarish. They're like opposites. And if we learn about Maharaj Ambarish, we learn what to do. And from from Durvasa Muni, we learn what to avoid doing. And in one sense, these two are contrasting views of the Vedas as well. That Maharaj Ambarish shows the Bhakti version of the Vedas, and Durvasa Muni basically is highlighting the other side, the side of the mystic yogi, the person who performs various activities, who the activities are actually designed to help people to gain various material benedictions and mystic powers. And this is not at all important for devotees, because devotees are not interested in such things. And so we'll get a contrast between these two versions of the Vedas. So we discover that from Nabhaga, Maharaj Ambarish took birth, and he was an exalted devotee, celebrated for his great merits, although he was cursed by an infallible Brahmana. The curse could not touch him. So this was discussed a few verses ago in 9.4.13. That's why we talked about Nabhoga and Nabhaga, his son, and then we go from them to Maharaj Ambarish, and Maharaj Ambarish is actually the focal point, because he was the emblem of what it is to be a devotee. Why was he the emblem of what is to be a devotee? It is here we find out how Ambarish engaged in devotional service. This was also a few verses ago, and this is a very famous verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Sukadeva Goswami said, Maharaj Ambarish, the most fortunate personality, achieved the rule of the entire world consisting of 7 islands. This is not what I was thinking. Let me see, is it the next one? Yeah, this is what I was thinking. This is 18 through 20, 9, 4, 18 through 20. But before we get that, we'll just touch this. So Maharaj Ambarish, the most fortunate personality, achieved the rule of the entire world consisting of 7 islands, and achieved inexhaustible, unlimited opulence and prosperity on earth. Although such a position is rarely obtained, Maharaj Ambarish did not care for it at all, for he knew very well that such opulence is material. Like that which is imagined in a dream, such opulence will ultimately be destroyed. The king knew that any non-devotee who attains such opulence merges increasingly into material nature's mode of darkness. So this is a rare thing in the earth, of someone having great opulence and not being attached to it and not being artificially puffed up by having this opulence. This is the nature of our world, that when people gain some opulence, they immediately find that it goes to their heads, and this is not a good thing. This is why people become entangled, because they think that through opulence they suddenly become God. We all think subtly that we are God in one way or another, but most of us are poor and we have no assets or power in this world, so it's hard for us to imagine we're God when these things are absent. But there are few who actually do have power and wealth and prestige of greatness in our material world, and therefore such people usually succumb quite strongly to the idea that they are the Supreme Lord. But how can someone avoid this? And here is the answer. This is 9.4.18 to 20. Maharaj Ambarish always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. So his mind is meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna. His words are describing the glories of the Lord. His hands in cleaning the Lord's temple. His ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. He engaged in eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples, and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavan. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the body of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of the tulasi offered to the Lord. He engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasad. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaj Ambarish never desired anything beyond anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service in various engagements related to the Lord. In this is the way to increase attachment to the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. So this is the sort of prototype of how we engage in devotional service. We are trying to use everything for Krishna's service. And we have senses, and we try to use them all the time for Krishna. I'm going to come back to this if we have time in a minute, but I want to move on to cover a few more points. In the purport, Prabhupada touches on 3 verses. This one is the first verse that he touches on. Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam yatmamam shantimrichiti. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. This is also known as the peace formula, and it's the last verse of the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And this tells us that we have to try to meditate on the following truths. The first one is that the Supreme Lord is the beneficiary of all sacrifices and penance. Whatever penance we do, whatever sacrifice we do, they are intended for the Supreme Lord and no one else and nothing else. And secondly, he is the Lord of all planets and demigods. So he is the person controlling everything. That's what we have to also recognize, that this is the nature of the Supreme, that he is the overlord and the controller of all things. And finally, that he is also the benefactor and well-wisher. So whatever we need, whatever we get, this is all a result of the Supreme Lord. He's the one who provided it. He is the one who bestows it. And we will always, if we always remember these 3 things, he is the beneficiary of all, he is the Lord of all, and he is the benefactor. He's the beneficiary and the benefactor, which means that he's the person who gets all things that are offered, and he's the person who gives all things that are offered to us. So both these things. And he's also the Lord. If we fully imbibe, understand, and live a life based on these principles, we will have peace. And this is what we find is the main emblematic qualification of our Maharaj Ambarish. Now, this is the next verse that Prabhupada quotes in that purport. Shatkarmani punu vipro mantra tanta visharadaha Vaishnava Guru Nasyad Vaishnava Swa Shva Pacho Guru. Even if a Brahmana is very learned in Vedic scriptures and knows 6 occupational duties of a Brahmana, he cannot become a guru or a spiritual master unless he is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, if one is born in a family of dog eaters but is a pure devotee of the Lord, he can become a spiritual master. So this is the Padma Puran, and this shows that the qualifications of a person who is a guru or a spiritual master is being a devotee. If one is a devotee, then one rises above whatever material disqualifications his material family background might have provided, and is singled out and respected as a guru. However, if someone is born in an elevated family and apparently seems to have, by the birthright, all these so-called important qualities, but such a person is not a devotee, then he's not qualified to be a guru. So this is an important verse as well. And Ambarish was not really being considered here as a guru, but he's being considered here as one who followed the Brahmanas. And because he followed the Brahmanas, he was actually considered very exalted. And he ruled his kingdom and he had no problems. And he was a perfect example of how our world should be governed. Now, this is the third verse that Prabhupada relates to in this purport. Yas yasti bhaktir bhagavati kinchana sarvair gunais tattva samasate suraha harav bhaktasya kuto mahaguna manorate nasati dhavato bahi. All the demigods and their exalted qualities, such as religion, knowledge, and renunciation, become manifest in the body of one who has developed unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead of Vasudeva. On the other hand, a person devoid of devotional service, engaged in material activities, has no good quality, even if he's adept at the practice of mystic yoga or the honest endeavor of maintaining his family and relatives. He must be driven by his own material speculations and must engage in the service of the Lord's external energy. How can there be any good qualities in such a man? So we are contrasting devotional service with mundane piety. And we're also contrasting in this section devotional service with material powers. We're contrasting devotional service with material acquisition. So these things are being contrasted in this section of Bhagavatam. And if we understand these things well, then our spiritual life will be quite easy to make progress for us. So this is kind of what this chapter is about. Again, these are our main themes: how to perform devotional service, mystic yogis and devotees, offenses against devotees, forgiveness of offenses, and material pride. We will discover that Maharaj Ambarish will be offended by Durvasa Muni, who will try to punish him for failing to observe fasting until the guest arrives. This is, of course, just it's etiquette, and Ambarish did what we just heard. Ambarish refrained from eating anything, but he was instructed by the Brahmanas that drinking a little water is considered fasting and also not fasting. So it's both fasting and non-fasting. And therefore, they considered that the dilemma that Maharaj Ambarish was placed in, the fact that he needed to break fast because his fast had been overdue, and he also needed to observe the etiquette of not eating something before his guest. And in this way, he could have broken the fast by drinking water, and at the same time be considered not to have broken the fast because he only drank water and it was not any substantial food. Nevertheless, as we see, Ambarish did this important idea, this important strategy, but this was not good enough for Durvasa Muni, and Durvasa Muni felt offended and cursed him by creating a luminous being of fire that was intended to destroy Ambarish. And Ambarish did not protest or find it difficult. Rather, he simply paid no particular attention, but the Supreme Lord did not allow this demon of Durvasa Munis to harm Ambarish. Instead, he was protected. And what happened after that, when the Supreme Lord sent his Sudarshan Chakra, which vanquished the demon that Durvasa Muni had created, that Sudarshan Chakra then followed Durvasa Muni all over the universe. And Durvasa Muni couldn't find shelter anywhere. And this was a problem. Finally, he discovers, by traveling to the spiritual world and talking to the Supreme Person, Narayan personally, that he cannot be forgiven unless he's forgiven by Ambarish. And of course, this is what he does, eventually Durvasa Muni in the right panel here, after being chased by the Sudarshan Chakra, takes shelter of Maharaj Ambarish to forgive him for his offenses. So offenses are there and offenses can be overcome. All right, so the one other thing that I kind of wanted to return to briefly, because I want to leave some time for questions, is this idea of how Maharaj Ambarish engaged all of his senses. So we have 10 senses, 5 active senses and 5 knowledge acquiring senses. And if we use them in Krishna's service constantly, then we will be purified. And even if we have great wealth, and Maharaj Ambarish had great wealth, we will not be contaminated by that great wealth. Instead, we will be purified. So this verse, 9.4.18 through 20, describes using all the senses. We have to learn how to engage all of our own senses. So I'd really like to talk about this quite at length, but there's no time for it. So instead, I'll just briefly mention it as a point, and that is that what we need to do, we have our devotional process. We get up in the morning, we chant Mangal Artik, we chant our rounds, we take prasadam, we associate with devotees, we hear from Srimad Bhagavatam. All these things are there, and they're a definite part of devotional action. However, there's still so many minutes in a day. There's so many seconds in an hour. And each hour has so many seconds. And how can we then use our senses constantly? And I think this is where we all have to be somewhat innovative to figure out what it takes for my particular self. What will it take for me to become fully engaged in devotional service? How can I reroute my senses and think about Krishna in everything I do? And of course, in the beginning, that's somewhat artificial, and in the beginning, that may be somewhat tainted by various material considerations and desires. But if we continue to reroute everything through service of the Lord, then we will be purified by that. So that's where yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayat, that somehow or other we have to become Krishna conscious, somehow or other. So yena tena, that's what that is somehow or another we have to become Krishna conscious. And if we can become Krishna conscious through the process of devotional service, then we have the basics, which are our sadhana and our practice, the stuff that's outlined by Srila Prabhupada. But we also can go that extra degree by trying to take all that hinterland, all those things that are on the outside, in between, the marginal stuff, and figure out how to wire that through Krishna. Yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshaya. So we hear, of course, that akama savakamo va moksha kama udaraditi rena bhakti yogini yajeta purusham param. That if one has no material desires, or one has all material desires, either way, if one engages in devotional service, one will eventually become pure. So that's the nature of devotional service. All right. So let me take some questions and answers now from the audience here of devotees who have gathered so nicely for our Srimad Bhagavatam class.
Maharaj Bhaktisiddhanta Swami is coming today.
Yeah, I know. I got your message, Adi. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to make it. I'm in a...
We'll call you. We'll call you.
Okay. I'm doing a marathon right now to finish up my taxes and all that kind of stuff. So I'm completely swamped.
You know, that this verse about how Maharaj Ambarish used his hands to touch the bodies of the devotees, you know, that's like, you know, pretty wild. I can remember the first devotee who gave me a hug, Sundakar. You know Sundakar?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember in one of the Prabhupada memories, when about Mishra's ashram upstate, one of the Mataji said, Prabhupada, can I give you a hug? And he said, why not? And then he like held her like kind of shoulder to shoulder like that, gave her a hug, you know. And Radhanath Swami, in his mercy, you know, I feel like that story of Lord Chaitanya embracing Sanatana Goswami, he had developed sores over his oozing pus. And Radhanath Swami, several times he's done this to me, it just blows my mind. I'm sitting there chanting japa, and all of a sudden there's this huge saffron cloud collapsing over the top of me like a like a blanket, you know, and there's this fragrance, and there's all I see is saffron and he like throws himself on top of me like a hug, you know. And it's so, I remember seeing the first time I saw devotees give each other a hug. It was in the Brooklyn Temple in 1973. And the two devotees were in the office, and three other devotees came in, and they offered obeisances. And then, I don't know if you've ever seen like a sumo wrestler, they jump up, you know, and they jump on each other, right? And they just jumped up from obeisances, and there was this tremendous, warm, affectionate hug. I was completely flabbergasted just to see the affection of the devotees for each other and exhibited like that in a tangible, physical way, you know. Very, very sweet. And of course, we all know what it's like to smell tulsi or to smell the incense and the flower, and you know, all of the senses can be engaged in Krishna service, like you said. But a hug from a devotee, what's his name? I don't know. Great big guy. He tried to hug Prabhupada one time. And he said he was trying to lift Prabhupada up in the air, but he couldn't lift him. And, you know, we don't want to be familiar like that. He said he realized it was offensive what he did, but the affection of the spiritual master is there. I remember the first time Radhanath Swami came to the Bhakti Center, I was able to wash his feet, right? You know, touching the feet of Radhanath Swami, you know, washing his feet. It was just the most, I was almost delirious with that experience. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami also, the first time he came to the Bhakti Center, I went to wash his feet. He would only let me wash one foot because he said, you're my god brother, I can't let you do this. But, you know, that sense of touch, you know, engaged by affectionately touching the bodies of the devotees. That's
very... like, you know, the Zen koan of one hand clapping, you did 1 foot washing.
Well, I washed it twice.
Let's see if anybody else has any questions, because we're just about out of time here.
Right.
Any questions from the others in the group here?
Krishna, I think someone wrote a question in the chat.
Yeah, I saw that. They wanted me to recite my journey with Srila Prabhupada. Well, there's not much to recite, you know. I met Prabhupada only one time, and at that time I wasn't a devotee. I saw him at a Rath Yatra in San Francisco, California. I didn't have any idea who Prabhupada was at that time, nor did I have any contact with the Krishna consciousness movement at that time. I was just a total karmi. I was there with a friend of mine, and my friend was the one who impelled me to come and to take part in that particular Ratha Yatra festival. So I did that, and I had this extra surprise of seeing Prabhupada. It was, although I was initiated by Prabhupada, that was the only time I ever saw Prabhupada. And later on, about a year after that event where I saw Prabhupada in Golden Gate Park at the Rath Yatra, I heard him speak. That time he did a talk on using everything for Krishna, particularly how all the senses have to serve the mouth to eat. You know, he made that point. And a year later, I was also at the Rath Yatra, but that time I had come on my own, and that time Prabhupada was not there. But shortly after the second time I went to Rath Yatra, I actually became a devotee. So I felt the need to do something deeper with spiritual life. I felt my life was falling apart. I was not satisfied or happy with anything that I was doing. Even though I was doing the things that I had imagined in my mind would make me happy, they actually weren't. So instead, I decided that I needed something else. I needed to understand the world and the nature of life more deeply. So I thought I would spend some time in a temple, and I came to the temple. And actually, that was it. After that point, I became a devotee. I never returned to my external outside world. My life that I had previously been living was over at that moment in time.
We heard a story about you at that first Rath Yatra, Maharaj.
Right.
You might want to hear that. The devotees.
Yeah, I know. I tell that story so often, I get tired of hearing it myself. Maybe.
The devotee said we should offer something to Krishna with love, something that's dear to us. So Maharaj, you just bought these new sneakers that he really likes. We took and put them.
You tell the story. That way I don't have to embarrass myself. But
it's cool. It's love. It's sweet. It's amazing.
Yeah, at any rate, I was at the second time I came to the Rath Yatra. There was, of course, the devotees were there, and there was the Jagannath deities on the altar, you know, big Jagannath, big Baladev, and Lady Subhadra in between. And the devotee, and this was not Prabhupada speaking this time, but this was one of the devotees, and he mentioned that actually, whatever we love the most, we should offer it to Krishna. This is another example of that yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayat, you know, idea that whatever way we can bring ourselves to Krishna. So he suggested whatever we love, no matter whatever it is, we should offer it. And so I couldn't think of anything else that I had on my person. I didn't have any money with me. I didn't have anything, you know, physical with me. And I thought, well, I had just purchased some sneakers, some tennis shoes. And I was really attached to them, even though, you know, I generally am not attached to clothes. I never was. But they fit well and they looked good and everything. And I thought, well, the only thing on my person that I have at this moment is these shoes. So I took them off and I thought, well, let me offer these to Lord Jagannath. And so I put them in front of Lord Jagannath on the altar there while everybody was taking prasadam. And, you know, I had no idea, you know, and I'm sure somebody thought, what idiot put their shoes on next to Jagannath, you know, and I'm sure they were thrown away or something like that. But Jagannath knew what I was doing, because that simple act, you know, as ridiculous as it was, only a month or two later, I was a devotee in a temple. That was the thing, I think, that pushed me over. The other thing, of course, was chanting that song by George Harrison, you know, about my sweet Lord. You know, that was an attractive song to me. So I sang that. So these kind of odd things that really are not devotional service in themselves can bring you to the platform of devotional service through agyata sukriti, unknowing benefit we get from the mercy of others. So because I did these two things, which were kind of stupid in some ways, but I was given the opportunity for the highest possibility for engaging in devotional service, which I took up, and I'm still trying to do something that remotely resembles devotional service to this day. All right, so we're at just over 8 o'clock, at least according to my clock over here. And I really see you have a good group of people that attend these morning Bhagavatam classes. So Zoom is taking over the world. It's quite obvious. And looks like COVID is still in charge of the world. And people are dodging around in various places. And devotees are taking ill here and there. So everyone needs to stay safe somehow or other. And I appreciate the spotlight to share some Srimad Bhagavatam with you all. I tried to look over this verse and say something relevant, and we will end here, and I'll turn it back over to our main host, and I'll drop out at this point. So again, thank you all very much for your kind attention, and all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Marge. We love you. All glories to Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. We love you too. Hare.